Welcome back to another edition of Forecast Lab. Always happy we have hundreds of you gathering around for each episode. And of course, this is not a program with hype and fluff. This is where viewers learn from an actual retired forecaster and we go into a little bit more depth. For today, it's our first program of October and we definitely got some changes on the weather maps. Off to the right, you can see Kirk, not to be confused with Captain Kirk. At the current time, Hurricane Kirk, 75 knots, making it a mid-range Category 1 storm. The good news is it is heading out into the deep Atlantic, recurving rapidly. These strong prevailing westerlies have been picking up these systems one after the other. And Hurricane Kirk is expected to strengthen to Category 4 over the coming days. And the Southern Storm Tropical Depression 13, it's looking to have pretty much the same fate as well. One area of concern is in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got this 40% chance area of formation. However, looking at the IVT charts, and again, this is more of a mid-latitude diagnostic. This is not really designed for the tropics, but I do find it useful because we can see areas of significant moisture advection. And of course, there's a lot of moisture in the tropics. And you can see this disturbed area coming together just north of Honduras, off the coast of Belize, moving into the Gulf. A vague tropical depression, tropical disturbance, and little Fujiwara effect between these two systems remains unsettled in the Gulf this weekend. And it just kind of shears out into this elongated area across Florida. And there could be some significant rains developing there going into early next week. So at this time, we're not really looking for a classic hurricane or classic tropical storm, but we may see something come together around midweek around the Yucatan or the Bay of Campeche. So that we'll bear watching. The flow is not conducive to that going north because of a positive pressure anomaly in the southeastern U.S. throughout the troposphere. So that should keep it kind of parked there in the southern Gulf and maybe making landfall in Mexico. But this is a long ways off and we'll just have to check back in on that next week. Across the U.S., the general weather picture looks like this. Looks similar to last week. Lots of cold air in the northwestern U.S., in the Dakotas as well. Temperatures in the 50s and 60s this afternoon. Warm weather throughout much of the central and southwestern U.S., and cooler weather in the northeastern states. We've got this vague stationary front through the southeastern U.S. Let's look at the upper levels. Well, we haven't seen this in a while. This is the 250 millibar chart. This is what we call the hemispheric product. This looks down on the northern hemisphere. There's the North Pole, there's Asia, there's North America, and we can see the distribution of the jet stream around the hemisphere. And what's more important is where the large-scale waves are. This is where we pick out the long waves. We see that there's a kind of a very trophy appearance up in Eastern Asia, another one maybe across Europe, and another one across North America. So this might be a three-wave pattern, so three major long waves. And there's also long wave ridges, one probably right there over the Atlantic, another one across the North Pacific, and maybe one across the Middle East right there. There could be four waves. It is kind of bumpy as you go all around, and it is broken up by some rather high amplitude ridges, like that one right there, across Yukon, British Columbia, and maybe extending down into part of California with that flattened ridge right there. So it is kind of a complex pattern, and this is blocking that you see right here. This is a cutoff low just south of a cutoff high. That's what we call a Rex block, and that tends to lock up the flow further upstream. And that's why we're kind of in a stagnant weather pattern with this very active Hudson Bay low. Let's take a closer look at that. There you go. This is probably a little bit more easy to read. We see that the flow out in the Pacific is quite active. We've got almost 150 knots across the Aleutians. We've got a high EPO, or I should say positive EPO pattern, across the North Pacific. So that means very strong momentum coming into the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia that tends to be very rainy this time of year. Strong flow across the northern tier states, a very deep Hudson Bay low with that low-pressure area around Coral Harbor, Arviat, Nunavut, and then you can see the blocking out here in the Atlantic, kind of a very messy pattern there, lots of swirls, and it's kind of like a wave on the beach breaking up into smaller vortices. We do see some ridging in the Gulf Coast area, some ridging in California responsible for that heat wave that's going on, and a little bit of medium to small-scale troughing across the Rockies. So that previous chart that you saw there, that was 34,000 feet. That's jet stream level. This is 500 millibars. This is about 18,000 feet. So this is what we call the mid-tropospheric chart. We see that the main belt of prevailing westerlies, the polar front jet in the mid-levels, is in the northern tier states, the Great Lakes, and the northeastern U.S. It is zonal, so forming very little in the way of waves moving north and south. This is a fairly stable pattern, not in terms of instability, thermal instability, more in the terms of it being dynamically stable, so it's not really prone to changing very much over time. We do have this strong subtropical high across California, across the Bay Area, responsible for some rather potent heat right now, and another subtropical high across the lower Mississippi River Valley. Here's the 850 millibar chart, and I don't really show this too often, but this does show the heights and the temperatures at about 5,000 feet. There is no data in the mountains because, you know, that's underground, so we don't really plot data there. But in California, you can see temperatures at 850 are running from 24 to 30 Celsius. These 26 degrees Celsius readings, those are in the upper 99.8th percentile, which means it's very anomalous. This is some of the hottest weather they've had in California. Let me show you the temperatures. This is some of the hottest weather they've had in early October since 1980. And you can see those temperatures are near 100 at Ukiah at this hour, 90s throughout the Bay Area, and as we go down the San Joaquin Valley into Los Angeles, lots of 90s and 100s. We've even got 106 there, actually 107 at Riverside, 109 at Palm Springs. That's on the other side of the coastal range. In Arizona, we've got 108 to 110 in the Yuma area. We've got 101 to 104 around Phoenix, and yesterday Phoenix reached 113, which set the all-time record for October. The previous record for October was 107, so yesterday really smoked that record. Previously, the last 110-degree day ever recorded was on September 19th, and we're actually expecting another 110-degree day on Sunday, so this is definitely an anomalous year for Arizona. Death Valley reached 114 yesterday, breaking their record for October. It is clear all through the deserts. We're expecting a high of 108 at Phoenix today, 98 at Tucson, 101 at Vegas, and we've got excessive heat warnings all through the southwest into the Inland Empire area, San Diego, Los Angeles, Escondido, Murrieta, Riverside, Corona, Ontario, the San Fernando Valley, Santa Clarita. They're all under excessive heat warnings, and those extend up the coastal range into the Bay Area. San Francisco, King City, San Jose, Livermore, Brentwood, expecting temperatures 94 to 113, and we only need 96 at San Francisco to break a record for today, expecting 94. And very notably, we've seen temperatures in the hills around San Francisco overnight running between 77 and 88 degrees and a few 90s at dawn. So that is some serious heat in that part of the country. Referring back to that surface map, we see a very characteristic pattern for a heat wave. We've got this inverted trough extending up the coastal range in San Joaquin Valley, northwestward towards San Francisco and Sacramento. That's typically a pattern that we see during intense heating, and it's basically an extension of that thermal low, which is semi-permanent across the Yuma and Phoenix area. In the Great Plains, we've got a very weak dry line, separating 50s dew points from 60s further to the east. A stationary front in the Red River Valley of Texas into Louisiana that's associated with a very weak push of cold air coming in from Tennessee and Missouri. Temperatures here warm as well. 90s all across the southern plains as we enter autumn. Kind of a corruption of the word autumn. It's a word I happen to notice on social media. Maybe it's trending. That's due to the fact that the southern plains no longer seems to cool down much in October. At least that's a trend I've noticed in the past 20 years. The nights are longer, the sun angles are 30 degrees lower. The atmosphere doesn't care, it just has endless amounts of heat. The long wave pattern's not cooperating, and they keep dumping that cold air repeatedly into the northeastern U.S., so we're kind of stuck in this stagnant weather pattern. Corridor of 90s from Houston to Dallas to western Kansas. We're looking for 92 at Houston, 93 at Dodge City, 95 at Liberal, and 95 at Goodland. In the southeastern U.S., warm in Florida, reaching the 90s in some areas, and upper 80s anywhere south of I-20. You can see the sea breeze is active across the Florida peninsula itself. A little bit cooler up in Tennessee. We've got widespread 70s there. Flood warnings continue in many of the rivers downstream from the Appalachians. Greenville, North Carolina to Columbia, South Carolina, southeastern Georgia, as the flood surge from Helene makes its way downstream. Those warnings will continue through the weekend. In the northeastern U.S., this band of showers and clouds from New York down to Pennsylvania and up to Quebec, this is within an area of an anticyclone, so not really a favorable pattern for this to develop any further. Nuisance flooding continues in the coastal northeast, in part due to the persistent northeasterly flow. Coastal New Jersey near Toms River and Chesapeake Bay looking for up to 1 foot of flooding. The Rappahannock River in Virginia, I think that's it right there, looking for 1 to 2 feet, possibly in part due to drainage from the remains of Helene. And we do have flood warnings continuing for the rivers around Richmond and Farmville. And that heat extends into parts of the northern plains. We're looking for a high temperature of 91 at Denver, 94 at Burlington, 94 at Pueblo, and 95 at Lamar. Trinidad, expecting 91. And we've even got mid-90s in parts of Nebraska, looking for 96 at McCook and 94 at Omaha. Upper 80s all the way into central South Dakota. But we do have that cold front slipping into the Dakotas and into Wyoming. That's changing the weather. We do have a low approaching Lake Superior. There it is on the surface map. There's a triple point that will be heading into Lake Superior and the UP of Michigan. They do have gale warnings posted for the western Great Lakes overnight. And further out west, closer to that high-pressure area, the zone of cold air advection, we've got a freeze warning in effect for western North Dakota, and we're looking for 20s and 30s in Montana, possibly down to 25 degrees at Butte, Montana. With these strong winds, we've got red flag warnings all across the Dakotas into Wyoming, into Nebraska, and we can certainly see that smoke on the satellite imagery. Fires continue to burn around the Sheridan area. Looks like another one around Jackson Hole. And for the northwestern U.S., no real problems. You can see some mountain wave altocumulus and cirrus come together, so probably some standing lenticular altocumulus right there. It's probably going to be very spectacular as we get into evening. We do have red flag warnings across the Idaho Falls area, and really that's about it. Just the usual mountain wave activity, probably kind of a choppy day for flying. Otherwise, VFR conditions, clear skies, and mild temperatures. And we head out into the Pacific, and there's a North Pacific high there, 1030 millibars off of Washington. Things get quite stormy in the Gulf of Alaska. Little low pressure area there near Kodiak Island. But take a look what's going to happen over the next few days. Major storm system developing in the Bering Sea as we go into tomorrow, dropping as low as 951 millibars. That will put much of the Alaska Peninsula, maybe Anchorage, under very strong southerly flow, and that means rain and winds. As we go into Friday and Saturday, we will see those strong southerly winds pick up on the southern coast, producing a lot of orographic precipitation all the way from Anchorage to Yakutat into the southeastern parts of Alaska, and that'll gradually shift towards the east, producing atmospheric river precipitation Saturday into Sunday from Juneau down to Prince Rupert. And you can see in the wake of that a large area of strong cold air advection coming down from the Chukchi Sea into the Bering Sea. That'll put a lot of very cold air into the North Pacific and keep things rather stormy. And I'm going to point out that on the 14th, the GFS hinting at a 947 millibar low south of the Aleutians, which would put Anchorage under fierce southerly flow. But that's beyond 240 hours. We're going to worry about that next week. Looking at Canada, it is rather quiet, but what you see here is a ridge extending from the western high Arctic into the Northwest Territories. That means a lot of cold air advection into the Northwest Territories and southern Nunavut and into the prairies. We've got temperatures in the 30s this afternoon. A very deep low pressure area in the western Hudson Bay region. Of course, this whole area in the upper levels is under a Hudson Bay low, Hudson Bay vortex, and so things are rather stormy, and we're seeing snow coming all the way south into Churchill and northern Manitoba. And we're starting to see some of the very first true polar air. Let's take a look up there in the high Arctic. Yeah, look up here. We've got temperatures dropping into the 20s, dew points into the 20s and teens. Now, typically, in the early fall, in late summer, we see a lot of maritime polar air there. Due to the muskeg and swampy tundra terrain, that is starting to freeze up now, allowing that dew point to fall further, and that helps the wet bulbing process and the production of cold air. So we're seeing much colder temperatures. Got that thickness trough right there. That is fresh polar air heading south. Temperatures in the 20s as far south as just west of Baker Lake, whatever that station is there. That's in the Diamond Mining District. But that's helping to produce that band of snow all the way from Resolute down through Joe Haven into Churchill. And they do have storm warnings, or I should say wind warnings at Joe Haven and Resolute for today and tonight. Winds will be gusting to 70 miles an hour through that corridor right there. Also, some stormy weather in the Hudson Straits, right around here, Saluit. They've got a wind warning overnight, expecting winds 70 miles an hour. They're very vulnerable to storm systems exiting the Hudson Bay region. So if you live in that area, very doubtful, keep a close eye on your weather warnings. All right, we're 17 minutes in, so let's take a quick look at that forecast, starting out with tonight. Cold air comes down into the northern plains, but does not really bolt south as we sometimes see this time of year. So for tomorrow, a little bit of cold air slipping into Kansas and Nebraska. We're going to start out rather cool tomorrow morning in the northeastern U.S., 40s in the Appalachians and New England, 50s on the coast, and 60s in Virginia. In the Corn Belt, it will be in the 40s, but a little bit of recovery as that southerly flow starts picking up. In the northwestern U.S., as we mentioned, very cold weather, looking at 20s tonight in Montana. And in the south central U.S., Thursday is going to be another hot one, up to 94 at DFW, 92 at Oklahoma City, and 94 at Wichita. 80s all the way into the Corn Belt, a little bit further north in western Nebraska, looking for highs in the 60s and 70s. And of course in the southwest, a continuation of the heat. Then we go into Friday. Little bit of motion on that front right there into the central Mississippi River Valley, kind of stalling out over Texas. We're going to see those low to mid 90s continuing over Texas. In the southwestern U.S., the heat continues through Friday and through the weekend. A little bit of relief in the San Joaquin Valley, the highs dropping into the upper 90s and to right near 100. Cold air moving into the western Great Lakes area. We start out with a cold morning in Minnesota, Dakotas, looking for 30s, but a rapid rebound during the day to the 70s and 80s as that southerly flow picks up and this warm front approaches. Then we go into Saturday. It's going to be a slight cool down for Texas, some clouds spreading into the area from this disturbance offshore. Highs will be in the low 90s there. Further up north, a big warm up in the northern plains ahead of this front. we're going to be seeing low to mid 90s from Kansas into Iowa. Des Moines, 91 degrees. Lincoln, 95. Minneapolis, 82. But some relief on the way. It's going to remain quite cool up there in North Dakota and Montana, looking for 60s and 70s for highs there. And of course, in the southwestern deserts, continuing that heat, Phoenix, 109. Yuma, 110. So that excessive heat warning probably will continue through the weekend. For Sunday, no real changes around the country except in the Midwest. If you're not in the Midwest, pretty much the same weather, although in the northeastern U.S., some rain and showers approaching with this triple point, warm front, cold front, and so on. In the southwestern U.S., Phoenix expecting to reach 110. Another record-breaking day with 111 at Yuma. So summer is that annoying house guest that just doesn't know when to leave. El Paso may reach 94 degrees, which would tie the record for the date. Then we go into Monday. Cold air invades the northeastern U.S., so a cool down there. Looking for highs in the 50s and 60s up north and the 70s down south. In Texas and Oklahoma, we shave a few degrees off those highs. You can see that there's a little bit of a backdoor front coming in, so we are heading into some slightly cooler weather next week for Texas. It will remain quite hot around San Antonio and Houston, however. And then we go into Tuesday. The entire country cools down just a little bit. That backdoor front continues moving into Texas. Highs will only be in the 80s from Dallas to Lufkin, Shreveport, 81 degrees, 70s in Arkansas. And we start to see a atmospheric river event in Washington, kind of a weak one. IVT is only about 300 to 400, and that will move inland as we go into Wednesday. And this front continues into the northwestern U.S., and yet again, this other front probably will continue to affect mostly just the northern plains. Stagnant weather elsewhere around the country. And that is going to be all for this edition of Forecast Lab. So, how's the weather in your part of the country? Is it rainy? Is it dry? Is it hot? Why don't you post where you're at in the YouTube comments and let us know how things are. If you've had anything interesting take place recently, let us know. Thank you very much to Brock Austin, one of our new supporters, I think a former supporter from years ago. It's good to have you back once again. And we'll see everybody back here on Friday. Hope you have a great Wednesday evening and Thursday. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.